What's up, A Push? Tarasco here. Early, bright and early. Wi-Fi was down yesterday. Couldn't do this last night. So we are here at 7:33 in the morning, as you should be sitting here in class. And today, what we're going to learn about is a little War of 1812. We will find out how this hat is able to be made because of the War of 1812. You'll see that hat later on. So let's start with a little context here. Jefferson's presidency, we talked about it earlier this week. Good, bad. Basically, overall, what he's doing is he's using civic virtue. He's doing what he believes is best for the country, particularly staying out of war. His foreign policy problems that he has are British impressment of sailors, stealing of our soldiers, stealing of our ships, stealing of American citizens, taking them and putting them in the Navy because the Napoleonic Wars are happening throughout Europe. The guys looking for world domination, and everybody needs supplies, and they don't want to pay for them. Everybody needs money. They don't have money to pay for them. So long story short, the best way to do it is the United States doesn't have a strong Navy. Why not just take, because we have a very strong Navy, does France and England. So Jefferson's got to deal with that. He's at an impasse. Does he go to war? Does he ban trade with two countries? Does he ban trade with all countries? And really, if you look at it, he decides he's going to pass the Embargo Act. No trade with anyone at all. That's what this line is, and that's what the turtle is. Remember, the Embargo Act cartoon is a turtle, the cursed "oh grab me," if you will. Which, by the way, if you look at the word "oh grab me" backwards, spells embargo. Nice. Excellent job, everybody. It spells embargo. Okay, so when you look at his policies, obviously the Federalists, mostly located in New England, are going to absolutely hate the embargo. And honestly, most people hate the embargo in general, including Jefferson himself. Hence why on his gravesite it says, "Here lies Thomas Jefferson, founder of the University of, or I'm sorry, author of the Declaration of Independence, the Virginia Statutes of Religious Freedom, and founder of the University of Virginia." He's missing one major thing, just that he was the third president of the United States. And this just shows you how much Jefferson hated the presidency. So Jefferson decides he's going to go ahead and pay homage to Washington. He walks away, even though he was going to walk away because he hated what he was doing. He hated what the presidency turned him into. So in steps my man, James Madison. James Madison, a little teeny tiny, let me see if I could pull up a picture of James Madison, a little teeny tiny picture, a little teeny tiny man who is really mad at the world because of how little he is. Can't find a picture of him, so probably should have had that ready, but that's okay. I'll draw a picture of him. Here is James Madison. And he is mad at the world. He's angry because he's short. If you look at him compared to George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, these guys from Virginia, James Madison is in the middle. And he's angry. He's short. He's only known for a war. And really, his legacy wasn't as great as some of his predecessors like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, in my opinion. So, little tiny James Madison, Mr. 120 pounds himself, wins the presidency for the Democratic Republicans. The Federalists lose yet another presidency, not in heartbreaking fashion this time, but they lose another presidency. And now all of a sudden, James Madison inherits these issues with Britain and France. And he's going to decide that instead of keeping the embargo, they are going to lift it. And what they are going to pass instead of the embargo is the Non-Interforce Acts. Now, this gets rid of this line and just creates two countries that we are not going to trade with. A U.S. ship leaving the coastline cannot go to England, cannot go to France, but they can go to Spain. Now, obviously, this is not geographically correct, but if you think about it, if a ship is heading to Spain, what are Britain and France going to do? Yes, good. They're still going to take the ships. So it doesn't matter in the long run. It doesn't matter at all. I mean, they're still going to end up taking the ships. This is not going to help us. It does help stimulate the economy a little bit better because we are trading. But again, the original purpose of the whole entire Embargo Act was to stop sending ships and stop leaving the coastline, so they stop taking things to keep us out of war. So that does not work. So another idea is proposed by a man named George Macon, and this is called Macon's Bill number 2. In my opinion, one of the stupidest laws and bills ever passed in the United States history. Okay? Because what Macon's Bill number 2 says is with these non-intercourse acts, we still have trade being taken from Britain, from France. Our ships are still being taken because our ships are leaving the coastline. So George Macon says, well, you know what? What if we just go ahead and send 2 ships at the same time with this treaty that states that whoever, either England or France, signs the treaty first, we will exclusively trade with them, we will embargo the other country, and we will use our Navy to help blockade the coastline of that country. Macon's Bill number 2. 2 ships, same time. The one in France lands, Napoleon says, wait a minute, you're telling me, United States, that you are going to blockade England and not trade with them and trade with me if I sign this treaty? And the United States says yes. And Napoleon says, yes, check mark, thank you, I'll do it. And now all of a sudden, Macon's Bill number 2, when we were trying to avoid getting in war, we piss off England even more. We are now really involved in the Napoleonic Wars, and we are now really helping France, which we're creating allies, which Jefferson or Washington warned us against. So now all of a sudden, we are involved in the Napoleonic Wars. And it's only a matter of time before Britain gets really pissed or the United States gets really pissed, and one of us are going to end up fighting each other and declaring war on each other. And that's going to happen in the Ohio River Valley. So just to set a little bit of context there, that's James Madison and what's going on. Well, all that happens in 1809 is the Non-Intercourse Act. 1810 is Macon's Bill number 2. So then, why is it the War of 1812? Shouldn't war have started right away? Well, not yet. Not yet. Okay, so let's look at our charts here. All right, and we're going to see how this is going to end up starting. Well, obviously, number 1, when you look at causes, we just talked about it. It's going to be impressment. Okay, impressment is going to be the number 1 cause of this war.
Jordan Williams, please report to
We can't do anything.
Jordan Williams,
Thank you, Cheney.
report to the main office.
Shout out the Secretary in the state. We cannot do anything to protect our ships. Our Navy is shrunken by Jefferson. He does expand a little bit, but not by much. Okay. Britain is still taking our ships because we're still leaving the coastline. And now that we're blockading them, they're even more motivated to take our ships. And they're even more motivated to take our sailors. So impressment by Great Britain. Remember, in the War of 1812, it is the Second War of Independence. We are fighting England again. And impressment is the number 1 cause. But we can't do anything about it. Number 2 cause. Remember during the American Revolution, the Treaty of Paris ended in 1781. What were the British supposed to do with the Treaty of Paris? Anyone? They were supposed to leave the Ohio River Valley. Good job. Excellent job, high school student. How shall remain nameless. Or George Washington in your high-pitched voice. They were supposed to leave the Ohio River Valley. Did they leave the Ohio River Valley? No, that was George Washington. Hey, George, what did you end up doing to try to fix the problems, to make them leave in 1795? I sent John Jay to go ahead and create Jay's Treaty. How did Jay's Treaty work out? It was horrible. Probably led to my death 4 years later. Wow, George Washington really giving us a huge, gigantic insight. For all of you that don't know, I have a massive George Washington portrait hanging on my wall. So he talks to us every once in a while, and he just gave us a little tidbit of information about Jay's Treaty. So, again, they never left. And not only did they never leave, they're actually gaining supplies through the Ohio River Valley and giving those supplies to the Native Americans, particularly to a Native American who is starting to realize how bad the Western ideas are and how bad white people are coming onto their territory, trying to take over. Native Americans are starting to assimilate with, in the Ohio River Valley, assimilate with the whites, and a man named Tecumseh does not like it. We'll talk about him in a second. But Britain, impressment and supplying the natives in the Ohio River Valley with weapons, basically arming them to attack. That is going to be your second cause. Okay, so you have impressment by Britain. You have supplying the natives in the Ohio River Valley because they never left. That's why John Jay's Treaty was such a disaster. And again, they're giving these weapons to a man. That man's name is Tecumseh. Tecumseh, just like Washington, is going to be that immediate cause for the war. Now, he is the third cause, and on the back of your chart, you have his speech that you are going to read and we're going to talk about tomorrow. But Tecumseh is a man who represents what all Native American leaders represent. There's a dream that they can continue to live by themselves, have autonomy without interference from whites, that whites will stop encroaching on their land, and that they will continue to be able to have their land, to use it how the Great Spirit allowed them to use it. Okay, it was meant for them. With all that being said, unfortunately for Tecumseh, he gives this speech, and William Henry Harrison, get to know William Henry Harrison. William Henry Harrison, governor of Indiana, went to go see Tecumseh. And this is how the war is going to start. He goes to go see Tecumseh because he's worried about Tecumseh attacking them. If you read the speech, you'll see it does have some violent undertones to it. It does warn white people about, if they keep coming on land, what is going to happen to them. And so William Henry Harrison goes to see Tecumseh. Unfortunately for Tecumseh, he's not there. And unfortunately for the United States, Tecumseh's not there. But his brother, who is very angry, very violent, very mad, he has a name with like 27 letters, but his nickname is called the Prophet, sees William Henry Harrison coming, throws a tomahawk, nailing William Henry Harrison in the chest. Except that wasn't William Henry Harrison. He thought it was, but it wasn't. The small skirmish goes, and then all the United States retreats, and then all William Henry Harrison retreats, and then all of a sudden we have talk about possibly going to war with Great Britain. Now, the United States, in the United States Constitution, it says that the president does not declare war. Does anybody know who does declare war? Good. Nice job over there. The answer is Congress. Okay, Congress declares war. The president has to go give a speech about it, about declaring war, but Congress has the final approval. So, with Congress being ran by Democratic Republicans in 1812, with a Democratic Republican president in little man James Madison, there is no doubt that war is going to happen. And the main reason why war is going to happen is because of these guys. They are the War Hawks. You have, and this is the fourth cause of the war, you have the War Hawks. This is a group in the Democratic Republicans that want to fight Great Britain. Remember, Federalists are for Great Britain. Democratic Republicans are for France. So if we are going to go to war with the British, you better believe that the Democratic Republicans want to go to war, particularly these guys. This is Henry Clay. This is John C. Calhoun. John C. Calhoun is from the South. He wants to spread slavery. He wants to fight to get more land. Henry Clay is from the West. He is from Kentucky. They want to fight to get more land, get the natives off so they can have more land for white people. John C. Calhoun wants more land so he can spread slavery. These are the ideologies of the South and the West. If we go to war with Britain, we defeat the British, we defeat the natives, we get more land, which means we can spread slavery in the South, and out West, we can have more profits with more land to farm. That is the idea of the Warhawks. Particularly, they want to take Canada, and Britain has Canada. And if you can do that, then you are going to be a successful country in the eyes of these Democratic Republicans. The Warhawks are the last cause of the War of 1812. Get to know these guys, Clay and Calhoun. John C. Calhoun and Henry Clay are going to be around forever. And right when you think that they disappear, they come back. And then when you think that they disappear again, they come back again. And then finally, maybe they die. Finally, right before the Civil War starts. Okay? So those are your causes. Impressment of soldiers, of sailors, stealing of ships, supplying the natives with weapons in the Ohio River Valley. Tecumseh, a person who symbolizes what Native Americans want and the Native American dream of living free and independent from white people. Again, that's going to die with Tecumseh, just like it does with Metacon, just like it does with Little Turtle. And then lastly, the Warhawks that are going to put pressure on Congress to declare war on Great Britain because of the Prophet's actions when they attack the governor's battalion, William Henry Harrison, in the Indiana Territory. So those are your causes of the War of 1812. War is declared in 1812 on Great Britain following a not so hot debate, and it is our first declared war. Now, taking a 30-second timeout here so I can get some coffee, but also to tell you this war split the United States in half. You had two parties that side with two different countries. We don't have that today. Republicans and Democrats really don't side. I mean, you have Republicans, we should do this foreign policy-wise. Democrats, we should do this foreign policy-wise. But you didn't see anything like this, where you had Federalists very loyal still to Great Britain. You had Democratic Republicans loyal to France. So following Macon's Bill number 2, where France signs it, all of a sudden the Democratic Republicans, they're sitting there saying, okay, wow, we got what we want. We can go to war with England. We can take Canada. The Warhawks are in Congress. They're the ones that are doing this. Henry Clay, John C. Calhoun, they're getting votes. They're getting votes. They're getting ready. They're waiting for war. They're waiting for war. They're waiting for war. And then boom, the Prophet strikes, and now we have war. Okay. But the Federalists, they don't want this war. They actually didn't even call it the War of 1812. They called it Mr. Madison's War. They did not support it at all. They actually supported England in this war. So if you look at the fighting, most of the Federalists are in New England and in the Northeast. Well, the best way to conquer Canada is to take the two major cities of Quebec and Montreal that are located right here. The problem is we can't go that way because the Federalists won't let them. So most of the fighting is going to be done in the Ohio River Valley and on the 5 Great Lakes. Okay. That gets us to our battles part of our chart. Not really many battles to know. Again, the College Board's not going to ask you other than turning points. But one battle to make sure you know is the Battle of Thames. Okay, this is in 1813. The Battle of Thames. In the Battle of Thames, Tecumseh is going to be killed. That is the only significant part of this battle. Because just like we talked about in Native American history, it's a vicious cycle. There is a leader that rises up. There's usually a treaty that happens that takes place between the natives and the tribe, and the United States. The United States breaks that treaty within a couple of years. The natives have no choice but to fight. The natives fight, and usually victoriously. But then eventually they're overwhelmed with either technology, with either people, or their leader is killed. And usually when their leader is killed, that is the end for the Native American dream of autonomy. And it's the same with Tecumseh. When Tecumseh is killed, the only hope that the natives have is that the British win, which is not going to happen. And it's a sad reality for Native Americans and United States history of how horribly we have treated Native Americans. And when Tecumseh dies, it is time to push them further and further west. And more tribes are going to start interacting with each other in a negative way. You're going to have a lot of infighting between Native American tribes over resources. And eventually the whites are just going to come right back out and take what is theirs and what they were given. So the Battle of Thames, where Tecumseh is killed, it kills that movement. It kills the Native Americans, and it equals further westward migration for the Native Americans out to the Great Plains. Okay. Now, because these battles are taking place on the 5 Great Lakes, there are 2 major battles, the Battle of Lake Erie and the Battle of Lake Champlain, where the United States starts to begin their proud naval tradition. The large naval ships in Britain that the British had could not really handle the Great Lakes very well. It was more for open seas fighting, more on oceanfront fighting. So the United States started making these smaller ships, and we're able to maneuver these ships a little bit better, and we're getting some victories. But overall, I mean, the War of 1812, battle-wise, was a huge. I mean, we were getting crushed in the War of 1812. Absolutely crushed. We're going to talk about how crushed here in a second. We were winning small little naval battles in the lakes. The Battle of Lake Erie is one of those huge battles that we end up winning, but we took like 50 L's before that. Okay, so just because we're kind of winning the 1 or 2 battles does not mean we're winning the war. And in my opinion, we were never really winning the war at all. Okay, and I'll back my opinion up with a little bit of fact here in a second. All right, the last battle is going to be Fort McHenry. Fort McHenry is right outside of Baltimore, and this is in 1815. Okay, so Fort McHenry is right outside of Baltimore, and when you look at Fort McHenry, the Battle of Fort McHenry was supposed to be an overall victory for the British. The British troops, following the end of the Napoleonic Wars in 1814, had a full commitment to all of a sudden we go from fighting all up here, fighting the British that were in Canada up here because they couldn't supply troops and they couldn't get troops here because of the Napoleonic Wars. Well, once the Napoleonic Wars are over, England's going to start sending troops along the East Coast, and they are going to look at taking our major cities like Washington, D.C., like New York, like Boston. Okay, so that's now their strategy following the Napoleonic Wars. Well, when they land in D.C., it's been evacuated. We'll talk a little bit more about that here in a second. And the next step after D.C. is to take Baltimore. Then they'll go up to New York. Then they'll go up to Boston, and the war will be over very quickly. Okay, so with Fort McHenry, that didn't happen. The troops that were supposed to be coming from D.C. up to Baltimore, we'll pretend Baltimore's here. They land in D.C. They're coming up. We have the Navy out here. Baltimore is like right here where these pins are. And these guys never made it. So the bombardment of Fort McHenry from the naval ships out in the harbor, well, I mean, it was just bombarding, but the white flag never went up. And if you listen to our national anthem, talks about the bombs bombarding in air, and our flag was still there. That's Fort McHenry. The Star Spangled Banner is written by Francis Scott Key. He is a POW in the harbor watching Fort McHenry get crushed with bombs, but also watching our flag, our massive, massive flag, probably the size of this classroom, waving in the air while it's being bombarded. That white French flag never came out. The surrender never happened. And after the Battle of Fort McHenry, it wasn't England that made the decision to stop waging war. It was Europe, because Europe now has to redraw and redistribute land and territory following the Napoleonic Wars. Okay? Basically, if you took a piece of paper and crumpled it up, that was Europe during the Napoleonic Wars. Now, all of a sudden, you open it back up, and it's all crumpled. You now have to figure out, where are we going to redraw these lines? How are we going to redo these borders? And England, being a major world power that was decisive in these victories, they have to help. So England decides, you know what? Let's go ahead and end this. The United States decides, you know what? You burned D.C. Let's go ahead and end this. And the Treaty of Ghent is signed in 1815. But the best part about the Treaty of Ghent is literally, it says, no land lost, no land gained, no money lost, no money gained. There was no victor declared. No victor declared, no money, no land, nothing. But it feels like we won. And I'll talk about why it feels like we won here in a second. Okay. So, two major events that you need to know. The first one is the burning of the White House. So during this war, when the United States, when Britain ends the when the Napoleonic Wars are over and Napoleon's exiled and Britain is now able to make a full commitment to troops, they are going to land in D.C. They're not going to attack the Northeast because the Federalists are there and the Federalists are actually helping them. Literally, these guys called Blue Light Federalists were supplying Great Britain with weapons and supplies and food and giving them places that they could attack. These guys are traitors, hence why they are on the traitor wall. So the British are going to land in Washington, D.C. We don't have any troops there because all the fighting is taking place out here. There are no troops to get to D.C. in time to defend Washington, D.C. So Britain lands, they walk right into Washington, D.C., and they actually literally burn the White House to the ground. Literally. And James Madison is forced, this is why he's small and mad in his portrait, he is forced to retreat to, I think, Pennsylvania or Western Virginia. But they take with them the portrait of George Washington, obviously the Declaration of Independence, for symbolism. Okay? But the burning of the White House shows you how badly this war was going for the United States, how badly we were getting our butts whooped, that our capital is burned to the ground. And yet, it doesn't stop. We still will not give up, particularly at Fort McHenry. Okay, so the burning of the White House, huge. By the way, you think about symbolism. The burning of the White House is going to rally people to want to fight against Great Britain, just like the attacks on 9/11, the attacks on Pearl Harbor are going to rally people against a specific type, a specific part of the world. With Pearl Harbor, it was the Japanese. We need to fight the Japanese. We need to defeat them. And with 9/11, it was terrorism. And so when you look at those symbols, that's what the burning of the White House is for the United States. It's a symbol. Wow. So they burnt it. We need to defeat them. And by the way, even though they burnt it, we're still here. Okay. And we're still one. And so that's going to lead later to nationalism. Okay. The other event that you need to know is the Hartford Convention. This takes place in 1815. Okay. Hartford Convention. Hartford Convention takes place in Hartford, Connecticut, up here, which means it's in Federalist territory. So, as I've said 1,000 times, this war was going poorly for the United States. The Federalists are looking at this war and they are saying, you know what? The British are actually going to win this war. The United States is going to lose this war. We need to protect ourselves and make sure that once this is over, the British, A, know that we are going to be loyal to them, but also, B, if it doesn't go correctly, we want to make sure that the Federalists live on forever, especially because we are going to win as Great Britain. We are going to win this war. So the Hartford Convention, the Federalists meet in Hartford, Connecticut, and they draw up these things called the Hartford Resolves. Okay? The Hartford Resolves are actually a good thing. They have several ideas in the Hartford Resolves. They want to end the Three-Fifths Compromise. Great idea. They want one-term presidents. Honestly, you probably can't get anything done in one term, but they come up with that idea. And the biggest thing is because when you look at the first 5 presidents of the United States, George Washington from Virginia, John Adams from New England, Thomas Jefferson from Virginia, James Madison from Virginia, James Monroe is going to win the next one from Virginia. They come up with an idea that no president should be from consecutive states. That is a good idea. They have good ideas. And they say that if their demands are not met, that they are going to separate from the United States. Now, here is the problem. This takes place in 1814, 1815. So we'll call these two guys John and Fred. John is a Federalist, and he says, you know what, Fred? Go ahead and take the Hartford Resolves down to D.C., demand that James Madison signs these and gives us what we want, or we will separate from the United States. Fred says, you got it, James, or John, or whatever his name is, and he heads down to Washington, D.C. But what's the problem? Oh, that's right. Nobody's there because it was burned to the ground. James Madison's not there. Nobody's there. So Fred gets there and he's like, this is not good. Who am I supposed to get this to sign this? And then it hits Fred and he's saying, uh-oh. James up in New England is printing this and putting it in the newspaper today. But we're not getting a signature, but it's going to be in the newspaper. But we're not getting a signature, but it's going to be in the newspaper. And the problem is, without the modern technology, there's no way for them to communicate. James prints it in the newspaper, and it goes throughout the whole entire country. And now everybody's looking at, wait a minute. So not only the Federalists were anti-war, but now they're talking about leaving and maybe joining Great Britain? That's treason. That's traitorous. And so the Federalists, after the Hartford Convention, the Hartford Resolves, they are seen as traitors in the United States. And the Hartford Convention will lead to the Federalist death. So even though they had good ideas, it was awful timing. If they did it a year and a half earlier, maybe their history would have been different. But the Federalist Party is only going to run in one more election, and then they are going to completely disband. They have no power anymore. They don't even run a presidential candidate in 1820. Okay, so they are now labeled as traitors, and now they are going to be completely dead. Okay, one more thing that we need to talk about before we get to the causes. This should go in battles, but I like to put it in events because technically the war was over. So the treaty is signed in December. The Treaty of Ghent is signed December 1814. Well, nobody told anybody in Louisiana, and a young man named Andrew Jackson is leading his band of misfits to New Orleans. Band of misfits made up of slaves, freed African Americans, prisoners, prisoners of war, his friends, his gambling buddies, and Native Americans. It's basically everybody. And England, outside of New Orleans, is ready to attack the port of New Orleans and take it. Now, again, this war came to a sudden end because of the Napoleonic Wars ending in Europe demanding that it end. So the Battle of New Orleans takes place in 1815, 2 weeks after the war is over. But there's no Twitter, there's no email, there's no text messages, there's no cell phones. Therefore, it was taking a month for the news to get there that war was over. So unfortunately, the war, well, fortunately for us, unfortunately for Britain, the battle happens. The Battle of New Orleans is a downright massacre. The United States destroyed England. And Andrew Jackson is so brilliant here. It was like about a mile long charge from where Britain was to get to the top of this little hill where Andrew Jackson is, and there's all these cotton bales all throughout this hill. Andrew Jackson took his worst shooters and put them down behind these cotton bales, and his best shooters up top. Your worst shooters are shooting maybe 10 feet away from a English soldier, a redcoat. They can't miss from there. It was a absolutely. I think the numbers. Don't quote me on this, but I think it was 3,700 casualties for Britain, 76 for America. That is a victory. So even though the war and the treaty ends the war with no land lost, no land gained, no money lost, no money gained, and no declared winner, because of Andrew Jackson and because of the Battle of New Orleans, the United States feels like they won. And we are now able to rock this hat loud and proud because we are the winners. Number one, USA, 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 all the way, baby. Effects. Number one, with the Battle of New Orleans, we feel like we won the war. Now all of a sudden, nationalism. 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 Now all of a sudden, we have nationalism. We have pride in our country. We are proud to be American. We beat them. It's ours now. They can't come back. This is it. We are the best. We will always be the best, and we have always been the best. That city on a hill idea, that is a huge effect of the War of 1812. The second effect is with the death of the Federalist Party, now all of a sudden, there is one political party. These are the two major effects from the War of 1812. Extreme nationalism allows you to get things done. And having one political party allows you to get things done. When everybody is unified, it makes everything a lot easier to get done. Okay, it allows for less wiggle room and less debate and things like that. So now things can get done in Congress. People are happy. We don't have to worry about impressment anymore. We can now make money. I mean, all of this is really, really, really good stuff. Okay, third, the natives are forced out again. We already talked about Tecumseh, but they are going to be forced westward again. And we're going to talk later this week about more and more and more problems that the Native Americans are going to have with the more and more corrupt American government that is not going to protect them. Okay. Number four, it solidifies us as our own. A lot of historians call the War of 1812 the Second War for Independence. And it solidifies us as independent. Declaration of Independence started this movement. The American Revolution did not finish the movement because Britain was still messing around with us. Britain was still taking our ships. Britain was mocking us with the Jay's Treaty. But now we feel like we beat Britain. And the last battle between America and Britain in the American Revolution was Yorktown. But that was all because of the French with their blockade. But this time, in the War of 1812, the last battle was the Battle of New Orleans. And that was a band of misfits, a band of a melting pot of Americans with Andrew Jackson at the lead, destroys Great Britain. That is a lasting legacy where Great Britain is no longer going to mess with us anymore. Great Britain is no longer going to be an issue for the United States. This war solidifies our independence movement that started in 1776. It took two wars, took thousands upon hundreds of thousands of deaths, but finally the United States is going to be on their own. And we're going to talk about tomorrow ushering in what is known as the era of good feelings, where we are going to see that idea, where we're not even going to depend on them for final products anymore. It's all going to be in the United States. That's it. 38 minutes later. I was meant to make this video a lot shorter. I'm sorry. But it is what it is. I hope you guys enjoy the rest of the day, and I will see you tomorrow.